Welcome to the Haunted Lore podcast, where we unearth the supernatural echoes of history's darkest moments. Today, we venture to a place where time hasn't healed all wounds, where the veil between worlds remains torn by violence and suffering. The island of Guam, paradise to tourists, ancestral homeland to the Chamorro people, and for a terrifying period during World War II, the site of unspeakable atrocities. When Japanese forces occupied Guam in December 1941, it began nearly 3 years of harsh colonial rule. The indigenous Chamorro people endured forced labor, food rationing, cultural suppression, and violent punishments for even minor infractions. But as American forces approached in July 1944, preparing to retake the island, the Japanese military made a fateful decision. They would force the Chamorro population into concentration camps in the remote Manenggon Valley. Men, women, and children were marched through difficult terrain, sometimes for days. The elderly and weak who couldn't keep pace were beaten. Some never made it to the camps. At Manenggon, conditions were desperate. Families constructed makeshift shelters from palm leaves and whatever materials they could find. Disease spread rapidly. Food was scarce. The stream that runs through the valley, the same one that flows today, became both salvation and witness to suffering. But for many Chamorro men, particularly those suspected of American sympathies or resistance activities, Manenggon became something else entirely. It became their execution ground. According to both historical records and survivor testimonies, Japanese soldiers would select groups of Chamorro men from the camp. These men would be taken deeper into the valley, to areas where the jungle grows particularly dense. What happened next varied. But survivors and local historians describe scenes of methodical brutality. Some men were forced to dig their own graves before being executed by gunshot. Others faced the blade of a sword or bayonet. Most disturbing were the reports of beheadings, a practice that has particular spiritual significance in many cultures, including that of the Chamorro. A body without its head, according to ancient belief, is a soul that cannot properly transition to the afterlife. In the chaos of war's end and America's recapture of Guam, many execution sites were never properly documented. Some bodies were never recovered. Tropical storms would wash away evidence. The jungle would reclaim cleared areas within weeks. And as life returned to a new normal after the war, many survivors found it too painful to revisit these sites of trauma. But some things refuse to be forgotten. The first reports of supernatural activity in Manenggon Valley began soon after the war. American military personnel stationed on Guam occasionally reported strange occurrences when passing through the area. Disembodied voices speaking in a language they didn't understand. The sensation of being watched, equipment malfunctioning without explanation. But it was the Chamorro people themselves who understood the true nature of these disturbances. Many families had lost loved ones in the valley, fathers, brothers, sons whose bodies were never recovered, whose proper funerals were never conducted. Maria Taitano, a survivor of the concentration camps who passed away in 2008, gave this account in an oral history project in the 1990s. She said, "We knew something was wrong with that place after. The old ones would say the spirits are restless. They died with anger in their hearts, with fear. How can they rest? Some were not whole when they died. The Japanese, they took parts. Those spirits, they are still looking, searching for justice, for recognition, for the proper rituals that would allow them passage to the next world." The most commonly reported phenomena in Manenggon Valley include disembodied voices, often described as whispers or sometimes desperate shouting in Chamorro. Hikers and visitors report sudden drops in temperature, even in Guam's tropical climate. Electronic equipment frequently malfunctions. Cameras fail to capture images, batteries drain inexplicably, recording devices pick up strange anomalies. But the most disturbing reports involve visual manifestations. Carlos Paulino, a local guide who occasionally leads historical tours in the area, shared this experience from 2012. He mentioned it was near sunset. We were heading back, running a little behind schedule. I tell people we don't stay in Valley after dark, but this group wanted photos of the memorial at the golden hour. As we were leaving, I saw them. 3 men standing among the trees, watching us. They were wearing what looked like old clothes, like from the wartime. But the strange thing, they had no feet. They were just hovering slightly above the ground, and their necks, their heads sat strange on their shoulders, like they were barely attached. Carlos reported that when he looked away briefly and then back, the figures had vanished. But several members of his tour group had seen the same apparitions. Other manifestations reported include shadowy figures that watch from the tree line but disappear when approached. The sounds of digging in areas where no one is present. The sensation of being touched or grabbed by invisible hands, particularly around the neck. Unexplained lights that hover above the ground, following the paths where prisoners were once marched. And perhaps most chilling, the appearance of what locals call the searching ones, apparitions of Chamorro men who appear to be frantically looking for something on the ground. According to local belief, these are the spirits of the beheaded, eternally searching for their missing heads. In 2005, a team of paranormal investigators from Japan visited Manenggon Valley as part of a documentary about war-related hauntings in the Pacific. What was meant to be a 3-day investigation lasted only hours. Takeshi Yamamoto, the lead investigator, later told local press, "We have investigated many sites of tragedy, many battlefields. This was different. Our equipment recorded temperature drops of nearly 20 degrees in seconds. Audio recordings captured voices speaking in what our Chamorro consultant identified as an archaic dialect, repeating phrases that translate roughly to "find me" and "I am still here." 3 team members experienced physical symptoms, scratches appearing on their necks and backs. But most disturbing was what happened to our photographer. According to Yamamoto, the team's photographer was reviewing images on his camera when he began to shake uncontrollably. The camera had captured something the human eye had missed, a line of figures standing in the background of every shot, figures whose features became clearer with each successive image. In the final photograph, the figures appeared to be moving toward the camera. The team left immediately, and the documentary was never completed. In 2018, a military veteran stationed at Naval Base Guam ventured into the valley on a solo hike, despite warnings from local colleagues. He was found 36 hours later, disoriented and dehydrated, with no memory of what had happened after his first hour in the valley. The only clue was his cell phone, which contained a single voice memo recording. 3 minutes of what sounded like a man weeping, followed by words in Chamorro that linguists later translated as, "They make us dig. Then they make us kneel." The veteran, who requested anonymity, was diagnosed with temporary stress-induced amnesia. But he maintains that something supernatural occurred. He stated, "I don't believe in ghosts," he told a local reporter. "At least I didn't. But I know this. Something doesn't want us in that valley. Something is trapped there and it's angry. To understand why Manenggon Valley might be particularly susceptible to supernatural activity, we need to consider the spiritual beliefs of the Chamorro people. Traditional Chamorro culture holds that proper burial rituals are essential for the spirit's journey to the afterlife. The ancient Chamorro would carefully preserve the skulls of their ancestors, believing they contained the essence of the person's spirit. These skulls would be kept in family homes and regularly honored. Dr. Elena Santos, a cultural anthropologist specializing in Chamorro traditions, explains, "When you understand the spiritual significance of the head in Chamorro culture, you begin to see why beheading would be considered not just a physical death, but a spiritual violence as well. A beheaded person, according to traditional belief, might be trapped between worlds, unable to complete their journey to the afterlife. The spirit remains earthbound, often confused, angry, and seeking completion. This spiritual understanding may explain the particular intensity of the hauntings at Manenggon. These aren't simply spirits of the dead. They are spirits caught in a terrible limbo, victims of not just physical, but spiritual violence. Further complicating matters is the syncretic nature of modern Chamorro spirituality. With the arrival of Catholicism centuries ago, traditional beliefs became interwoven with Christian practices. Today, many Chamorro people maintain both sets of beliefs, praying to Catholic saints while also respecting ancient spiritual traditions. This means that attempts to put these spirits to rest must navigate complex cultural and spiritual terrain. Simple exorcism rituals might not address the specific needs of these spirits. Today, Manenggon Valley stands as a memorial site. A modest monument marks the entrance to the area where the concentration camp once stood. Small crosses and traditional Chamorro spiritual markers can be found throughout the valley, placed by descendants of those who suffered there. Local residents approach the valley with reverence. Many avoid the area after dark. Those who do enter often bring small offerings, flowers, food, or traditional items to show respect to the spirits. Some families who lost relatives at Manenggon continue to conduct yearly rituals at the site, combining Catholic prayers with traditional Chamorro practices designed to ease restless spirits. Tour guides who bring visitors to the memorial site typically leave before sunset and stick to well-marked paths. They share the history honestly, but warn against disrespectful behavior. The story of Manenggon Valley is ultimately not just about ghostly encounters or supernatural phenomena. It's about the enduring impact of historical trauma. How violence echoes through generations, how memory persists in both cultural consciousness and, perhaps, in the very fabric of a place. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the spirits of Manenggon demand something from us: remembrance, respect, and recognition of suffering that should never have occurred. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Haunted Lore podcast. If you found yourself moved by the story of Manenggon Valley, we encourage you to learn more about Guam's history during World War II and the resilience of the Chamorro people who endured these atrocities. If you enjoyed this journey into the supernatural echoes of history, please subscribe to the Haunted Lore podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. It helps others find these stories that deserve to be told.